Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Hrycun, and I'm an MA student here at the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta. And I'm really pleased this afternoon to share with you some of the research that I've been working on with Dr. Nathalie Kermowal and with the Rupertsland Centre for Métis Research. In the years following the sale of Rupertsland in 1870, Métis families and European settlers associated with the Hudson's Bay Company began staking out claims along the riverbanks outside of Fort Edmonton. Although promises had been made to the Métis in the newly created province of Manitoba that their claims would be recognized, Métis in other parts of what was Rupertsland received no such promise. Further, those occupying lands in Rupertsland would have to wait until official surveyors could survey their lands and confirm their right to occupy those lands. The Métis in Edmonton were concerned that the rapid changes in the West would lead to their land claims being ignored and ultimately lead to their dispossession. To support this, we argue that the Métis who occupied river lots on the south side of the river faced significant socioeconomic challenges, and their lack of kinship ties to the new ruling class in Edmonton adversely affected their ability to navigate the process of obtaining legal ownership of their river lots. Additionally, the implementation of Scrip in 1885 complicated land ownership and furthered the divide between those who could navigate the bureaucracy of Scrip and private land ownership and those who did not. While many Métis families had already been dispossessed of their lands in Edmonton before they were eligible for Scrip, Scrip added additional layers of complexity to the dispossession of the Métis in Alberta. The shifting socioeconomic situation in the West caused great concern among the Métis in Edmonton. Concerned about the lack of permanent title to their land, they petitioned Ottawa to address their land claims. By 1879, provisions had been put in place through the Dominion Lands Act that would allow the Governor and Council to make an order to satisfy the claims of the Métis outside of Manitoba. However, Ottawa did not respond to the Métis' concerns. Upon hearing news of the uprising at Duck Lake, the Department of the Interior initiated a claims commission on March 30th, 1885, to issue Scrip to the Métis residents of the Northwest. It was their hope that this would satisfy the land claims made by the Métis. The Canadian government sent a commission to Edmonton on June 3rd, 1885, with the authority to, quote, satisfy any claims existing in connection with the extinguishment of Indian title, end quote. The commission included Chairman William P.R. Street, Roger Goulet, and Amédée Forget. As was done in other parts of Western Canada, the commission offered Scrip to people of mixed ancestry who were born before July 15, 1870. Half-breed heads of family resident in the Northwest Territories were eligible to receive Scrip certificates, redeemable for 160 acres of land, provided that they already had an uncontested occupation to a plot of land, or $160 to be applied toward the purchase of Dominion lands. Children of a half-breed head family were eligible to receive Scrip certificates redeemable for 240 acres of land, provided that that individual had an uncontested occupation of a specific plot of land, or $240 to be applied toward Dominion lands. In 1886, this provision was amended so that children could elect to receive Scrip certificates redeemable either for 240 acres or $240, regardless of their current land occupation. The Government Commission took 1,000 Scrip applications in Edmonton the first summer, and the Commission returned to Edmonton and St. Albert to negotiate Scrip in July 1886. Among the residents of the Northwest, the cutoff date of July 15, 1870 for Scrip eligibility was contentious, as those born after that date were not eligible for Scrip, regardless of the fact that the first Scrip commissions did not visit until 1885. On July 3, 1886, the Edmonton Bulletin reported that petitions were circulating among the Métis at Edmonton and St. Albert to extend the date of eligibility for scrip. This issue would not go away and became an election platform during the 1896 election, which led to the victories of those parliamentarians who supported the Métis cause. With the 1897 Klondike Gold Rush, an influx of explorers passing through Edmonton on their way to the Mackenzie and Peace River districts renewed land rights issues, and the Department of the Interior thought it prudent to grant claims to Métis in the Northwest who were born between July 15, 1870 and December 31, 1885. Indeed, when Treaty 8 was being settled with First Nations, a Scrip Commission accompanied the Treaty Commission and was meant to settle claims of those born before 1870 as well as those born prior to December 31st, 1885. Acknowledging the complexities of land ownership in the West, the federal government extended this policy to the residents of Alberta and Assiniboia and Saskatchewan and Manitoba in March of 1900. In October 1900, a Scrip Commission returned to Edmonton to hear the claims of those who were now eligible for scrip under the revised dates. James A.J. McKenna and James Walker took scrip applications for those born after July 15, 1870, but before December 31, 1885, including applications made by the heirs of the deceased who would have been eligible to receive scrip. In November 1901, the Scrip Commission returned to Edmonton and heard an additional 264 applications for scrip and issued 96 scrip entitlements. Many Métis families in Edmonton took advantage of scrip for themselves and for their children. In Edmonton, 25 of the original river lot inhabitants and their immediate families received scrip. However, there is no uniform way in which scrip was handled by families in Edmonton. On the north side of the river, many inhabitants had already secured or were in the process of securing legal ownership of their land via homestead. For those individuals and families, scrip served as an additional entitlement to land. While it is unclear at this time how many of the original river lot inhabitants of Edmonton applied for scrip, records suggest that at least 161 individuals successfully completed applications to receive scrip. From those successful applications, at least 172 scrip certificates were issued in the name of the original occupants. This number includes the original river lot inhabitants themselves, their children's, and any heirs they or their children had in the event that they were deceased prior to receiving their own scrip. Many of the original river lot inhabitants received scrip by virtue of being an heir to a family member who was deceased. Unfortunately, much information is missing or incomplete with regard to scrip applications and certificates of those families in the original Edmonton settlement. What is known is that of those scrip certificates granted by the federal government, only 19 scrip certificates are known to have been applied to land in the name of the scrip holder themselves. The remainder were assigned to a third party, including the many land speculators who frequently capitalized on the diminished value of scrip. In Edmonton, scrip speculation was rampant, despite scrip being intended solely for its applicant. Indeed, it was intended that scrip could only be used by an individual that was named on the certificate itself. However, the reality of scrip was much different, and speculators often purchased scrip to be used by themselves or to be resold to others. Of those whose scrip records are complete, 82% of the scrip certificate issued to the original river lot occupants in Edmonton went directly into the hands of scrip speculators. While most of the Edmonton river lot occupants' scrip certificates fell into the hands of scrip speculators, most of the scrip certificates were located on lands in the Edmonton Land District. However, some scrip certificates, the original Edmonton river lot occupants, were located as far away as Winnipeg in the east and Kamloops in the west. For other Métis residents of Edmonton, the promise of scrip had serious implications. On the south side of the river, the Daniel family claimed river lots 23 and 23A. Instead of applying for homestead, as many other river lot inhabitants had done, Daniel intended to wait until he was able to acquire his river lot with his scrip certificates in 1885. Daniel believed that he had a rightful claim to his land, and in 1885, when he applied for scrip, he intended to use his scrip to obtain his ownership. Unfortunately for Daniel, the land he had understood was his had been unknowingly purchased by a local resident, Mr. McKernan. Because of this, Daniel was unable to make his claim to his own land, and McKernan had the legal paperwork to prove his own claim, while Daniel was at the mercy of Indian affairs. Ultimately, Daniel was not successful in proving his claim to the land. Daniel's intention to utilize his forthcoming scrip to obtain the river lot he occupied highlights an additional layer of complexity of the original Métis river lot inhabitants being unable to receive legal ownership of their lands. The role that social stratification and government policy played in the dispossession of the Southside Métis from their river lots is illustrated through the narratives of the Métis river lot occupants. The introduction of scrip in 1885 allowed many of the established Métis families in the Family Compact in Edmonton to secure their lands. And having already secured title to their river lots, some sold scrip to speculators. For others, scrip was used to acquire additional lands. However, families like the Daniels were ultimately dispossessed of their lands, of the lands they occupied, as they were relying upon the promise of scrip to acquire the rights to the lands they were working. Other families, such as the Garneaus, maintained their Métis identity in an increasingly Euro-Canadian society by having a foot in both worlds, only to be pushed out of Edmonton years later, due once again to a land dispute. Social stratification, rapidly changing socioeconomic factors, and the introduction of scrip all served to dispossess the Métis in Edmonton of their lands. Thank you.